everybody. I think we've got a good critical mass here as far as attendees jumping in. So why don't we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm Zach Hoene from Lighter Capital, the VP of Strategic Partnerships, and I'm super excited today for our session. We have some great presenters, and we're going to be talking about getting to MVP and beyond. So let's get going here. In terms of housekeeping, we have a great Q&A function in Zoom. Please use that to drop questions in. We'll have an extended Q&A section in the back half of the hour after the content. And the content will probably go about a half an hour or so. So plenty of time in the end for all the Q&A. Additionally, we're going to throw up a survey here in just a moment about all of our topics for today. So please respond accordingly and let us know which areas most interest you. So hopefully we can linger on those topics a little longer as we go through the content. But in terms of who we've got today, let's jump into that. So yeah, right off the bat, Dustin Bruzenak, CEO of Modern Logic. Dustin, please introduce yourself in Modern Logic.
Hi, I'm Dustin. Modern Logic is a digital product studio, and I founded it about 8 years ago now with my twin brother. We've helped tons and tons of startups and small and big businesses build and ship software. Our focus is on lifecycle management. So getting to market and then iterating in market while in doing lots and lots of shipping is kind of our expertise.
Awesome. Thank you, Dustin. And additionally, we've got Kirk Klobe from the CTO and one of the founders of HabitAware. So Kirk, please tell the audience a little bit about yourself and HabitAware.
Hi, I'm Kirk with HabitAware. We started up HabitAware to create a wristband for people with body-focused repetitive behaviors like skin picking, hair pulling, and nail biting. Gives you a little gentle reminder and integrates with a mobile app so you can kind of track your statistics and how you're doing. And I've been doing software and IT for many, many, many years. So that's where my background is.
Great. Thanks, Kirk. And here's the poll. So right before we jump into the content, let's just take a moment. Yeah, please respond with how you heard about the webinar today and the avenues of media that you found to register, and then also kind of which portion of the content you're most focused on and curious about as we jump in. So we'll give everybody just a moment to knock those 3 questions out. All right, well, let's get rolling here and get into our great content for today. So on that note, I will be handing it over to Dustin and Kirk. Here we go.
Cool. All right, so we've broken this out into 2 phases, pre-MVP and post-MVP. So if you're post-shipping, please bear with us. And these are going to be pretty rapid fire. You see me looking off to the side of my screen. I'm looking at my notes. So we're going to start with pre-MVP. How do you get to market and some basic tips on how to do that without blowing your budget or your timeline. All right, so our first point is, and you've probably heard this before, do the simplest thing and launch before you're ready. So this is still something, even though we have all this lean product advice, that is very, very prevalent, where people will come and they will, want to over design or build a piece of software that has too many features. So the real key is to build just the bare features that you have that solve the client problem that you think is existing, and then getting to market and shipping that software as early as possible. So an example of something that we advise our customers not to do is try to make your app look and feel like Instagram or TikTok or whatever the flavor of the month is from your social apps. We've had clients come in with $150,000 budgets and ask for a $50,000 animation. Just use your custom animations, use your basic color schemes that are on brand. You can make it look good without spending a lot of money, and you can spend a lot of money making it look good, right? But your user only really cares that it's solving their problem. So we really advise that people try to keep it simple. As much as you want to build a robust product that looks like the things that people are using every day, you have to understand that those people are using groups like Facebook, apps like Facebook, which have billion-dollar development budgets. So I'll throw it to Kirk for his thoughts.
And I think that's one thing that our team did fairly well when we were developing Keen 1. We had a very, very lean product vision. Okay, this is just a very simple vibration reminder on your wrist when the band detects you doing this behavior that you don't want to do. We didn't have any additional features. People would say, hey, will it do step tracking? Will it do this? Will it do that? Will it do the other thing? And we didn't say, oh, people asked, we should add it in. We just really kept to that very, very lean feature set. Made a very simple app. We didn't even really have any cloud-based data collection for people to go look at their dashboards. We just kept everything right in the app. We kept it very simple, and that let us get to market very quickly for just having 4 people and having a hardware development cycle. So keep it simple. I mean, even kind of a ruthless simplicity.
I like that. Ruthless simplicity is good. Good way to put it. And so that leads into our second point, which is trust your developer. Part of that is your developer is going to be able to tell you how to be ruthlessly simple. If you don't trust your developer, and this is either an external developer or an internal developer, you need to get a new developer, because your developer has hopefully built a ton of products, has seen a bunch of situations, and is best positioned to tell you that the thing you're asking for is impossible, expensive, really difficult, or that there's just a better way. And what we've seen is, especially with new founders or founders that are coming from environments that aren't necessarily tech focused from a business perspective, they tend to look at the timelines and at the pushback from the developer and think, oh, we just need to put more pressure on the development team. They're going to be able to deliver this faster by just working harder. And that's not actually the case. You have to understand that these are experts, and you have to treat them with that level of expertise and trust them. And if you don't trust them, obviously the easy answer is find someone you do trust.
Definitely agree with that, Dustin. You have to really trust their judgment and their experience. I know that in a previous life, I had spent about 20 years doing professional services and being on that side of the table where you're trying to give your customer the best product that you possibly can, leveraging your experience and what you've done and what you've seen. So it is really important that you do have somebody that you trust that experience. Maybe not just blindly trust everything they tell you to do, but for the most part, this developer is really going to try to give you the best, the best product, the best features, the things that really matter to clients, that are going to matter to making your product successful, and hopefully keep you on that track. So like Dustin says, if you don't trust your developer, get a new one.
Right, and that dovetails nicely with picking the right partner. So a lot of people are going to do this with an external organization, but even if you're looking for an internal partner, you need to pick not only someone you trust, but someone who understands your business, who is capable of helping you make trade-offs to get to market, more so than just, should this button be red or blue, or should it animate in when you hit it, or should it animate out? But a developer who really can look at your budget and say, here's what you can accomplish with $50,000. Here's what you can accomplish with $500,000. And preferably one who's done it before, so that you're really getting your developer on board as a true partner instead of just order takers. So many people will go to a consulting organization, especially if they're used to offshore, and look for someone that'll just build it the way they ask for it. And the problem with that is, you're not the Coen brothers of software development. Generally, you probably don't understand all of the technical trade-offs that are being made. Even if you're a developer and coming from a development environment, if you find the right partner, they're going to be able to enrich what you're building, get you to market quicker, and help you make those decisions so you can focus on things like fundraising and those sorts of things.
And also, don't underestimate the don't underestimate kind of having that rapport and kind of that good camaraderie with your partner. I think one of the things that really struck me as HabitAware was looking for a partner to help us with some of our development work. And the first time I had met with Dustin, I think he and I were still talking after about 2 hours. We were having some good conversations, telling war stories and that sort of thing, but there was just a lot of rapport there and a lot of commonality. A lot of, we've been through this, and, I've been through this, and that really helps, especially when there might be, as you get into some of the more stressful portions of your development cycle, to have that good rapport with your partner where you can really just have a straight up conversation and work things out very quickly. So don't underestimate that relationship on top of the technical skill and the technical things that the partner has done.
All right, this is a popular one, right? When to offshore and when not to offshore. And I'll acknowledge, as a mostly onshore development company, I have a bit of a bias here. But I've also been in software for more than 20 years, and I've seen people make these types of mistakes. And generally, the answer is you almost never want to offshore your MVP. And the only case that you would want to do that is when you are working with someone internal who is going to manage that product, who has already had experience offshoring. Because what you don't want is add the complexity of your new business model, the complexity of building a new product, on top of the complexity of learning how to run an offshore development team. And then the second caveat I'd put to that is make sure it's a team that your person has worked with before, or someone on the team has worked with before. Because again, you're looking to reduce your risk. One way to reduce your risk is to reduce the cost of things, but that is far less likely to actually reduce your risk than finding partners that you know can get the job done. And when you're out there and you don't know how to offshore, and you don't know how to find a firm, and you don't know whether your firm is any good, that is a bunch of extra risk that you're adding on top of the I don't know if my business model is going to work risk, which is really the one you want to be focusing on when you're building your MVP.
I have very little to add to that, except yes, don't do it. I would go so far as to say that unless you or somebody on your team has specifically worked with that exact team to ship something, the risk is too high. So you don't want your risk being there in getting your product actually built and developed.
The other thing with offshore is you're going to end up with order takers far more often than you're going to end up with those trusted partners. And they're not going to push back on you when you say something that's expensive, because their model is usually to bill hourly, and not that they intend to overbill, but this is just, you know, part and parcel for how they work. You know, you've got that huge gap, you're sending stuff over the wall, it's coming back, you're sending it back over the wall. And the goal is to reduce the iteration time as much as possible and focus on the things that really matter. And it's harder to do with an offshore team. There's more communication costs. All right, so now for the fun one. We're going to talk a little bit about what to do after you ship. So this is anyone who's shipped their 1.0 product all the way up to if you're on 2.0. There should be some good stuff in here for you.
And I'll just chime in. Again, this is Zach. Please use the Q&A function to load any questions in as we're going through this content. We reserved a good chunk of time at the end for review of all your questions. So yeah, please use the Zoom function for Q&A. And additionally, for anyone curious who may have missed the beginning, there'll be a recording of this that'll be available later. But with that, let's jump into Post-MVP.
There's some fun ones in here. All right, so let's jump right onto the first one, which is don't listen to the loudest voice. This is one of my favorites. So you've already shipped your software, and your big customer comes back to you and says, it would be really great if it did this thing, right? That's great, but your big customer is already paying you. So making them happier is great, but unless they're saying we're gonna leave, and even then, really consider what kind of features can I add to the product that are gonna get me access to new customers. My existing customers are already paying me, right? Not that you aren't going to constantly improve the product, but as a business owner, as a founder, and as a product thinker, you need to be looking at what expands the scope of this product so that I can actually scale it. And too often as founders, we get too burrowed in on the specifics of what the product is doing and not who it's doing it for and who it could be doing it for. And I think the other component is if you have a big business, that if you're B2B and a big business, let's say it's just a big insurance company says, it needs to do X and then we'll buy it. If it does X, they probably won't buy it. I've seen maybe 200 cases of this, and I would say about 5% of the time they actually purchase. You want to get them to put their money on the line in order to get that feature developed, or they're not a real customer, just not saying no because they don't want to say no, right? And so the big customer, the big fish, the only reason to go after that is if there's a checkbox feature like PCI compliance or HIPAA that you really need to get into place in order to actually meet the minimum threshold in order to do the work for them. But in the absence of that, don't look at your biggest potential customer and use that as a way to set the direction of your product. It's one of the worst mistakes you can make.
And from our perspective, is more of a direct to consumer product, with a large number of customers out there. We really looked at, you occasionally get like the really, really vocal users on social media or something complaining about a specific feature or a lack of feature or functionality. And we had the good fortune of having a fairly good, customer support ticketing system. So we could really understand what are the real complaints about this. From our perspective, why are people returning this, right? What kind of complaints are keeping people from buying this product, and why are they sending it back to us? So we really focused on those types of features. And sometimes they coincided with the loud voices out there, but we took it as part of kind of this aggregate of feedback on what is really causing pain. Why aren't they buying it, or why are they sending it back?
Yep. Now we get to the more controversial point in the topic that I would say, in general, features and redesigns don't increase your sales, right? So if you're building a product company, this sounds like this is probably shocking to you unless you've done this before. But what happens is you're constantly looking to improve your product. You have this laundry list of features in your backlog that you're developing. You're picking the ones that you're hearing are the best. You add them to your product and you ship, and what happens? Well, if it's anything like the few product businesses I've run before, or like our customers, you see a 5 to 10% uptick in sales for about 3 months, and you fall right back down to baseline. The reason for that is, unless the feature is giving you access to a new audience and is combined with a marketing plan that is reaching a new audience, it is not going to increase your sales. Your current customers are already paying you. I can't say this enough. Making them happier is great, but that does not mean they're going to go and tell their friend. If they're happy, they're already telling their friend. Right? You need to be looking at ways to change the footprint of your company in the market and your product in the market. You need to be spending the money that you would spend on adding random features to the product, to marketing, doing user research, analytics, and these sorts of things, and changing your business, because your product is not your business. The other component is redesigns do not increase revenue. Making it prettier does not increase revenue. Adding animation does not increase revenue. It may, over time, result in a more fundamentally sounder product, but that's a multi-year endeavor. It's not changing the color scheme or changing the icon is not going to massively improve your revenue. What might is changing your website or getting your Twitter presence in line and spending money on those sorts of things, as opposed to adding features. Because in the average app on mobile, for example, you have 20 features. The average user uses between 2 and 3 features in their mobile apps. So just think through the mobile apps you use every day and how many features you're actually using and how many are buried. Don't be spending your time and money building those buried features.
Well, Dustin, this is one of those topics where this is the topic where I have everything to say and I have nothing to say, right? Because I've been through, after 20 years of consulting and services and constantly being told to redesign an app so it pops. Can you make this pop? I guarantee that every time I've made an app pop, it has never resulted in more users, more sales, or anything like that. And I think, from a psychological standpoint, I think it's very easy to do because it's very tangible. Everybody can have an opinion. It doesn't require highly specialized knowledge, right? Everybody can have an opinion on the color, the tabs, the font, everything, and it feels very productive. You feel like you're very productive. Look at how much work we've done. We've done this great redesign, or we've added all of these features, and then when it doesn't translate to anything, it's like, oh, well, what do we do then? Well, guess what? Most people think, well, we need to add some more features, or that redesign wasn't good enough, so let's do it again. And it never, ever, ever works. The only thing where I would say that it probably pays to look at a targeted redesign is if your analytics and your data support, when you're maybe your onboarding period or your onboarding process is way too cumbersome, right? We've all used those apps or those websites where you've got to go through a dozen screens before you can even get into the app and see what it does. You've got to log in, you've got to pick a password, it gets rejected because it doesn't have 75 characters. You need to solve a CAPTCHA, that kind of thing. So that type of targeted redesign or feature addition, I think, can help keep people from dropping off. But outside of that, yeah, the gratuitous redesigns and colors, logos, animations, that sort of thing makes you feel very productive, but generally doesn't result in a lot of new customers or losing old ones.
Yeah, to use a concrete example from a previous business that I ran, we had scaled our product to about $500,000 in ARR, and we were going on to version 3, and we'd done that with developer designed UI. So we had graphs that had a bright yellow line on them that you could barely see from 10 feet away against white. And we had buttons that were really hideous. We had an icon that had a letter in it. And so in version 3, we went to one of the world's best design firms, and we spent a ton of money getting it redesigned. And we launched version 3, and that was one of the major features that we'd included. And we only saw, again, a 15% uptick in revenue. And we saw that uptick in revenue for a very short period of time before we fell back to baseline. Meanwhile, adding a new type of partner module that allowed people to do financials for partner companies, which expanded our market, almost doubled our revenue, and it took less than a month to do, and we didn't have to pay an external organization. So make your product look good, that's great. But understand that that isn't improving your business, right? Improving your business is improving your business.
Well, and don't allow yourself, if you can help it, to get distracted by a customer or by a competitor or a potential competitor adding features. You know, if there may be some buzz that, hey, you know, this up and comer that's a competing product is going to add these features. Don't allow yourself to be distracted and just, you know, take a U-turn or a detour and add a whole bunch of features just because somebody else is. You know, those were quite a few discussions that we had as we were developing Keen 1. You know, again, the hardware development cycle takes a bit longer to get things to market. So there would be some potential competitors that would say, oh, you know, well, HabitAware says they're going to do this, we're going to do this. And it really turned out to be a whole lot of nothing. And it really wasn't true competition because we kind of stuck to our story and kind of our mission. So don't get too distracted by that. Pay attention to it. You know, don't ignore your competition, your potential competition, but don't allow them to dictate your feature design.
Right. Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a slightly later point as well, because I think that's worth circling back to and addressing more directly. But we'll jump into trust your product owner, which is this one is surprisingly hard for people to get right sometimes. And there's kind of two elements to it. One is your product owner should probably not be your founder or CEO, right? One is you care too much. Two is you speak with too much authority. And three is you should be out fundraising or working on the business model, building partnerships, these sorts of things. You really want a product owner in-house that you trust to be the final word in making the decision, that isn't going to have to go to the CEO and ask permission, isn't going to have to go to the board and ask for permission, right? Development involves thousands of decisions that need to be made, dozens of decisions in any given week, if not any given day. And if you don't have a product owner that's empowered to make those decisions, that you trust to make the right ones most of the time, then you need to get a new product owner, or you need to look at what your trust relationship is with that product owner, because that is the person whose job it is to turn things around super quick with either your internal team or your external team. And yes, if he makes the wrong decision or she makes the wrong decision, sure, you might have a 70% optimal solution, but a 70% optimal solution that's shipped is far better than a 100% optimal solution that the entire board had feedback on and just spent months really, really thinking through, but shipped and allowed you to get scooped by either your competitor or you have customers out there waiting or you run out of financing, these sorts of things. So don't pick a product owner that you don't trust to make those decisions. And then when you do, empower them to do that. They shouldn't have to be checking with you all the time about the direction of the product.
And this is another topic where I've seen, you know, both ends of the spectrum, something that's much, much easier said than done to kind of empower that product owner. A lot of times you'll see like the product owner is empowered until the CEO or one of the founders doesn't like what they're doing. And then they come in and say, well, go ahead and do this anyway. So it's always a balancing act. And I think at HabitAware, we've been very lucky. We've usually been able to come to very rapid solved disagreements. If we disagree on a specific feature or a way something should be implemented, we kind of have a final arbiter on the co-founder team that says, okay, here's all the arguments. I've thought about everything, and here's what I've decided we're going to do. So that has actually worked very well for us. If you can't have a dedicated product owner that's making the decisions, at least have kind of a product decider. If you're doing a little bit more of a team involved feature selection and design where everybody kind of gets in there, and because there is maybe expertise that relates to each of the people having a say on the features, have somebody who is kind of that final decision maker, and have people say, yes, we're willing to go with what this person says. We may disagree with it, but yes, like you said, we need to ship. And I think we've got a good group of co-founders at HabitAware that says, okay, this isn't exactly the way I wanted it, but we need to ship. So let's just pick something and go, because most of the decisions really aren't critical decisions. They're not one-way doors that you can't come back from. You can ship it, even if you disagree with it, get some data, and then if you do need to revisit it later, that's always an option, instead of getting too hung up on having it be what you think is perfect right out of the gate.
Yep. All right, so next, this is my favorite. So real companies ship. I'm sure you've heard that before. We're really, really obsessed with shipping at Modern Logic. And the reason for that is we believe that if you've shipped and you think your product is perfect, you've shipped way too late. Getting to market is the single most important thing you can do in your business to start and to get that MVP shipped, and then to ship often post MVP, which is something people kind of forget, right? We are no longer in a world where you can have a 1.5 year development cycle and do Photoshop CS5, right? And then next CS6, and then a bunch of people buy it. People live on a month-to-month cycle now, and they want to see the product improving in a month-to-month cycle. And on your side, you're learning. So anytime you learn something, you want to be able to put that in the product and get it to market so you can validate that learning as quickly as possible. And so one of the mistakes we commonly see startups make is try to hold either features or IP in reserve until it's perfect, or until it's user tested, or until they feel it's reached some level of maturity, without actually validating that that is something that's going to improve their business or increase the revenue. And one of the major reasons that people use for this is, oh, my competitors are going to see this feature and they're going to copy it, and then we're going to lose everything because they're going to be better positioned than us. Competitors do not take your business from you, right? Unless they are producing something that you can't do, unless they have a strategic thing that is in their positioning that you can't copy. The reason you lose business 95% of the time is because you are not getting that thing to market, or you don't understand your market or your business model or your customer. 5% of the time, okay, maybe your competitor is actually doing a little better than you and reaching a few customers. But if you focus on that 5%, you're going to miss the 95%, which is the things that you don't know or understand, right? About your market, about the new markets that you could be approaching. Way better to invest your time and money on those new markets, that new direction that you could be going in, new ways of making your revenue, right? It's a fool's errand to try to copy your competitors, and it's a fool's errand for them to be copying you. That does not actually increase everyone's market share. By and large, your competitor copying you is a compliment.
Not a whole lot to add to that. I totally agree that, shipping is definitely a competitive advantage. Everybody's got great ideas, right? But being able to actually drag them across the finish line and get them in the hands of customers, that's the only way you're going to find out, what you need to do next and how to move forward. And, the faster you can do that, that really does give you an advantage. And it also lets people see that you are really aggressively taking care of your product and getting it out the door, with, like you said, it's, we don't have 18-month dev cycles anymore. You should be getting things out there on a frequent basis. I know I very often judge apps. If I'm looking for a new app to do something and I see that the last version was 9 months ago, I'm not touching it, right? I'm going to see something that's been updated in the past couple of weeks, because I know people are continually taking care of it, fixing bugs, taking feedback, suggestions, all that sort of thing. So I definitely judge on shipping just as a software developer. And again, I think the old cliche is still true. If you If you ship a product that you feel is completely finished and polished, you took way too long. You really took way too long. We can joke about, the iPhone, iOS didn't have cut and paste until how long? They shipped with no copy and paste, and people were just fine with it. So get it out there. If you're not slightly embarrassed about your product state when you ship it, you waited too long.
Yep. And that involves follow-on releases too. Too often we say, okay, we've shipped, now we can work on the things that we've built up in our backlog. No, you really want to be out there learning and integrating that learning as quickly as possible. The accelerated approach to integrating learning into your product is the single biggest thing you can do to improve your business, right? And that involves being really, really good at listening and looking at markets and analyzing what's going on, and really, really good at taking that knowledge and converting it into things that actually do improve your product footprint in the market. So I think we're up for Q&A next, right? Or
Yeah, that's a great point, Dustin. So yeah, really appreciate all the insights and topics. I realized we had to go through this quickly to hit so many great areas of focus. And in that regard, we're planning on doing more webinars together in future quarters this year. So we'll get into other topics around this area and then some subtopics to dive into as we plan future webinars. But additionally, that brings us to the Q&A section. So we're gonna throw up a poll real quick just to kind of get some feedback from the audience today on what was useful and some areas of interest to cover in those future webinars that we just mentioned. Additionally, we have some great questions already, but please use the Q&A function in Zoom. That's how I'll be managing the Q&A for this back half of the session. And, we really are excited to dig in here. We've got some great expertise with Dustin and Kirk, and we can address specific questions around pre or post MVP or other related issues pertinent to the topics today. So the poll, I believe, is finished. So please keep piling those questions in and let's get rolling here. So let's see, right off the bat, and I'm answering these chronologically. So Kurt, at what point did HabitAware start looking for outside help? Was it before or after fundraising? And were you pre or post revenue when that got going?
That was really after we had V1 in the market for a while, the Quinoa band, and started to get some feedback on features and kind of do that roadmap for the next generation of our product, which is going to be coming out here in the next couple months. So we looked at everything that had to be done, and we decided, okay, do we add FTE, do we add headcount to do this, or do we kind of get an outside firm that can kind of handle everything, kind of soup to nuts? So we decided to do that, and we'd had some funding. We received some government grants and had some ability to put that funding towards Dustin's team and getting some help from them. And so it just really made sense because there was a lot of work we're doing for the next generation product. So that's kind of the point. That was kind of the point where we decided, hey, if we're going to get all of these features out the door in this time, we need some outside help. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Kirk. Next question from the audience. What about adding premium pay features? Does that help generate more revenue or bifurcating the product? What do you guys think about that?
So I'll weigh in there. This is a great question because it shows that you're thinking in the right way about your product. New features that are premium are incremental improvements on your revenue stream. And they're always going to be incremental unless the new feature is a big enough feature that it's going to get you into a new client base, or that it's going to lead to a number of heads getting added to your software if you're a B2B business. Someone wants 500 seats instead of 10 seats because it does this thing. But again, that's probably you listening to the loudest voice in the room. So I'd say premium features are great, especially if you're free. Get on those premium features because you need to make money somehow, unless you're Bezos or funded by Bezos, right? But I think too many times we focus on selling to our existing customer. You have to basically say, okay, what is the ROI on this if only 10% of my customers get upsold? Because 10% would be really good for most of these premium features, right? That would be perfect for a premium feature that you added, right? One example for this would be, if you're adding a feature that is a pro feature on top of sort of a baseline, box check feature, your Your users are going to appreciate it. You're going to get some upgrades. It's not going to be 100%. It's not going to be 50%. It's going to be 5%. All right. Do the math. Make sure that 5% makes sense for you. And if it does, then invest in that. But you should also be looking, if you're doing a million a year in annual recurring revenue, you should be looking at, how do I do 2 million? And the only way to really do 2 million, 20 million, 200 million is to find those exponential increases in market, and premium features aren't going to do that for you.
In that regard, oh, go ahead, Kirk.
Just going to say nothing to add there. I would say pretty much the same thing.
In that regard, just based on your guys' prior experience, is it better to add those features a la carte or a more premium version of the overall product if you've got a few of those features to add?
It's better to add it as a new version of the product. As much as you want to ship often, so these are kind of diametrically opposed goals, in that you want to ship often, but you also want to ship enough that your users don't feel nickel and dimed. And this is both true of B2C customers, and it's especially true of B2B customers. If you're running a business, you are pretty sick of people asking for more money, especially since you're budget constrained. And the only reason you consider that is if it really enables you to either get your budget to go further or to enable a whole new pain point to get solved by that premium or pro feature. So a business owner, a business purchaser is not going to be excited by one or two little box check features. They're going to be excited by, oh, this now integrates with my finance software, so I don't have to do that manually anymore, right? Giant features that really remove a significant pain point, that's where you really want to focus.
That's helpful. Thank you, Dustin. All right, next question is more about redesign, as we touched on that topic earlier, but I guess, when does it make sense? When does it really add value in terms of really cleaning up the look and feel of the software?
Oh, that's a really good question. And Kirk, feel free to jump in. I know I'm jumping in first most of the time, but redesigns almost never make financial sense, just straight out. What they do make is brand reputation sense. So overall, over time, you want to be improving your product, and you want to have a cadence for that. So I would say you don't want to say, this is our redesign, 6 months, 3 months, even a month, we're going to be redesigning. But you should be saying, okay, this is the next 2 weeks, and we're going to be improving the onboarding workflow, and we're also going to get a new icon. And next 2 weeks, we're going to be making our buttons look a little better, and we're also going to be adding this feature. So it's not that you don't do it. And the other piece of redesign is technical debt pay down. That's like a credit card. You want to be paying that down a little bit every sprint post-launch, unless you're pre-revenue, then focus on revenue, people. But the majority of your time should be focused on understanding your customer, either by literally watching them use the product. Too much we focus on analytics. Go watch your clients use your product. It is the best form of analytics, but also use your analytics. And then use those to inform, how do I actually improve? If I'm having a 30, 40, 50, 60% drop off in my sign up, okay, now it's time for a redesign, right? And the rest of your budget should be spent on your marketing function, on your user understanding function, so that you can go out and understand why you're not a $100 million company and build a strategy to get there, right? And so much, if you're focused on the product, you're not answering those fundamental questions about your business model, right? So it's not, don't do it at all. Do it incrementally, do it in small bites, and understand that the ROI on that is a long, long, long time in coming. And you probably have a 2 or 3 year window at most with your funding environment.
That's great. And anything to add, Kirk, around when to think about, UI, UX, and how to invest in it?
No, just a side point that kind of one of Dustin's comments triggered is that it is great to actually be talking to your customer, and if everybody talks to the customer at some point, that can add so much. That can add as much or more as looking at tens of thousands of analytics data points. I mean, for example, one of the things we offered for keen customers is a free half-hour video call if they had difficulty getting the band work the way they wanted to, or they had some confusion about the app. And, as the developer of the firmware and the mobile app, I would take these customer calls and I would sit with these people for a half hour and say, oh, I can see where that would be confusing, because we have the curse of knowledge, right? So we've designed this app and we've been living and breathing this thing for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Okay, but now what's making sense to the customer? What doesn't make sense to the customer? So, we did do some targeted feature fixes and kind of streamlining of workflows based on people saying, hey, this is confusing. And if I, as the developer, hadn't really gotten to watch the people do this and listen to them interact with the application, probably wouldn't have been able to get a lot of that real gold knowledge that I could have maybe parsed out of analytics, but to actually just talk to that customer is huge. It's really good. And even ideally the people writing the software should be doing some customer face-to-face.
Yeah, at Adobe, they paid to have actual consumer research groups, and we'd sit behind a window and watch people swear at our product. Never learned more than what points is someone actually screaming at their computer screen because your product is making them frustrated. Worth its weight in gold.
And just to jump off that point about usability, how should you think about adding a robust feature set versus making it a little bit too overbearing to kind of have a new user jump in and really understand how to use the product? Like, is there a balancing act there? Or?
Absolutely. And I would say err on the side of simplicity. Users are a lot less likely to read and navigate your app than you think they are. If something pops up on the screen, they're not going to read it. If there's a feature in a settings window, they're not going to see it. And too many times you're focused on these checkbox features and not focused on what 2 or 3 key differentiators are from your competitive model. And you should really be focusing on and doubling down on those. And I would say, if you have a whole bunch of features that you want to add, think about, hey, is this really the right app or the right web service for this, or should it be a different thing, or should it be an add-on where a user can opt into that complexity? Users hate complexity, and this is both business users and consumers. In fact, business users hate complexity more so than consumers in general.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and it may sound kind of harsh and negative, but I don't mean it to. Users generally don't love using your app. They want to be in your app for as little amount of time as possible. For a utility type of app, obviously, if you're going for something like a game like Candy Crush, you want people in there as much as possible. But generally, they don't love using your app. They love what they're doing in your app. So if you can make any of the non-essentials as streamlined and as ruthlessly simple as you possibly can. I mean, I got made fun of at a previous company. I had started up the mobile team right around the time the iPhone launched, and we had done a few mobile apps for our consumers. And I would just do ridiculously simple, ugly one-screen apps, but nobody ever needed to be trained on them. And customers loved it because they could open the app and be done in 10 seconds and then get out of it. They would adjust a hearing aid or do a quick thing, and it would just take them, and they loved it. And my app was ugly. I designed the colors and the icons, and it was horrible, but they loved it because they didn't need to think, that whole don't make me think thing. So to the extent that you can do that and not force your customer to think, because they do not love your app as much as you do. So make it simple for them, make it easy.
The hubris of user experience is that you want to spend all this time making your user experience really good and entertaining and enjoyable, and really should spend all of your time making it so that your user doesn't actually have to experience the experience, that there's less experience for them to experience to get their job done in a given day.
That's a great point. Related, I've used the same weather app for probably 8 years, but I'm not a meteorologist. I don't need to know the barometric pressure. I just need to know if I need a coat or an umbrella, and I want to be in and out of there. So those are great points.
I think there's a weather app that literally pops up, wear a coat, and that's all. It doesn't
that's all you need, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
Can I go to the beach this weekend? That's all I want to know.
That's all I'm trying to get out of it. Next question from the audience. Overall, in terms of just the presentation today and the topics we covered, how much is more pertinent to a B2B versus a B2C software offering, or is it pretty universal among the points we covered today?
I think this is a really good question. I would say they're universal. So one of the mistakes we make in B2B software is to assume that there's some big cold business entity using our software on the other side, but that's a human being, right? And that's a human being that's getting trained by the B2C software that they have on their phone in their environment, right? So if you're not delivering the same kinds of experiences for them as they're getting with your home software, you're in trouble. And oftentimes with business, and when you're associated with business, you have to work even harder to understand your customer, because it is harder to get in. It is harder to talk to them. They are busier. They have other things to do. And so you need to focus even more on shipping, analytics, and understanding your customer than you do. And I think that it's a false dichotomy to assume that B2C is really different than B2B. You've got humans using your software. You need to build some empathy for the person on the other end of that piece of digital delivery. And you need to really spend your time and energy understanding why they bought it, what their pain is, and how you're solving it, and who else has a similar pain that might be adjacent to that pain that you could also find. So I would say it's directly applicable to both.
Now, with that being said, I would argue that in some cases, in an enterprise scenario, it can be somewhat simpler because you may be having a large number of seats sold via contract. You're going to develop a contract with a large enterprise organization, and they may have a formal list of features that you need to implement. You say, okay, we have a contract signed. Here are the features that we need for our organization. So it's kind of sitting there right in front of you. Whereas if you're B2C, you might have to kind of sneak in a little bit more via analytics to figure out what's going to make the most difference to the most number of potential customers. Whereas in an enterprise situation, it can often be just kind of wrapped up in a, hey, here's almost an RFP. Here's what your software needs to do, and we'll sign a contract with you. So I think the principles apply to both, but in some cases, enterprise can be a little more straightforward and, hey, we need to do this, and they'll sign the contract.
Right. That's a good point. And I think enterprises, while they're looking for more features, can also, the advice to not do a redesign is even more applicable to business customers, because they don't care what it looks like. They care that it solves the problem and that it earns an ROI on what they're spending with you, right? And you can make it lime green and bright pink, and they will still use it if it solves the problem. Will they ask you to change the color? Oh, yeah. But generally, they'll say, this is great. It's solving my problem. It would be great if it wasn't lime green and pink, right?
Well, in my experience, people who use enterprise, and anybody who's used enterprise software knows what I'm talking about. But in many cases, just a change for the sake of change will drive people crazy. It's like, okay, I've just figured out how to use this horrible software. I know all the hotkeys I need to use, and then, oh, they've done a usability redesign. It's like, oh my goodness, just leave it alone. The quality of enterprise software UIs, you couldn't possibly do any worse than that unless you set out to do it explicitly. So,
yeah, for what it's worth, the lime green and pink UI design is an actual real world example for a project that I didn't work on at Modern Logic, but it was a developer driven design where the lead developer said, I'm going to make it this color because they aren't going to bring a UX designer in. I'm going to prove to them that this is a bad idea. And then we shipped it, and no one complained at all about the color scheme, even though it was hideous.
So the neon watermelon was well received, Dustin.
Yeah, it was pretty much a watermelon color scheme, and not in that, oh, it's pleasantly watermelony, more in that we picked deliberately garish colors that don't work together and made it look horrible deliberately in order to prove a point, and then we didn't prove that point. It was just fantastic learning experience.
I'm still waiting for the hot dog stand color theme to come back into Windows, if you remember that.
The yellow and red. Next question from the audience, gentlemen. When does it make sense to pursue a software patent, and should that be done for an app?
Yes, but, so I think if you have unique IP, it's always worth exploring a patent, because a patent is a really good way to build a moat around what you're building. That said, if it's going to get in the way of shipping, ship, right? Patent is something that your CEO pursues while you build the product, right? Or that your legal team pursues while you build the product. Make sure you can afford a patent. It's not going to prevent people from copying you unless you're really, really good at writing patents or you're really, really unique. And I can promise you, you're probably not either of those things. What it is, it's a nice to have. And it also, if you're planning on selling your company, it's a useful bit of IP to own. But I would say in general, look at the patent as a nice to have and not as a formal business function for you in terms of increasing your revenue or anything. They're perfectly good to explore, but in general, that when you're saying, I'm starting this product, I want to get a patent, you don't even know if the product is going to solve the problem or if people are going to pay you for it. And so you also have to be okay with throwing that money away, because most of the time you're going to launch and that thing you thought really is amazing needs a lot of work, and that work might go directly against the work you put into the patent. So you really don't want to invest too much in patents up front.
That being said, sometimes it can be very attractive to investors who say, hey, if you do have some unique IP, if you've got a unique idea, say, okay, are you protected by patents before I even consider investing? Yes, we are. So that can make a difference too. But otherwise,
yeah,
I would agree with that. Kind of pursue it adjacently. Realize that it might be a sunk cost, but depending on what your value proposition is, it might make sense, because that's just kind of the way of the world. I mean, I used to work for $1 billion hearing aid company, and in a lot of cases, it was just a war chest. Any idea that you came up with, patent it, and then you can negotiate with competitors or partners or that sort of thing. So it depends,
Right.
but tread carefully.
When I was at Adobe, we were rewarded for patenting simply so that we had a war chest in case we went to nuclear war with a Microsoft or Apple, and the resulting, salt the earth annihilation no one would remain standing, right? And so that you're not in that position if you're in a startup. What I would say is I agree with everything Kirk said, but think of your patent as sort of a mid-market, mid-growth strategy, not as an early growth strategy, right? It's not going to be the thing that gets you to that 1 million mark. It might be the thing that gets you to sell the company at 20 or 30 million or 300 million or whatever as a piece of that overall strategy, but you're not going to launch on day one. Your patent is going to do nothing for you on day one, right? Again, your competition doesn't matter. Like you keep saying this over and over and over again. Too many patent is just basically saying my competition really matters. No, they don't. How you build the business and how you solve the problem, that matters. Your competition, sure, the fact that they exist is something you want to pay attention to, but they're not going to be the thing that kills you. 95% of the time, you're going to be the thing that killed you. The decisions you're making right now are the thing that kills you, not because your competitors don't competing you. The one case I would say your competitor can outcompete you is if they have more funding, and if they have more funding, you should really seriously consider what that means for your overall strategy. But that is totally different than a patent, and probably worth its own webinar. How to compete against a better funded competitor is its own thing.
Awesome. Next question, pre-MVP. If you're going to, beta or go out to potential customers to get feedback, what types of things should you be asking them before you launch to ensure the product is ready to actually ship the first time?
Well, what my favorite is, would you pay for this? And weight that by, when they say yes, about 90% of them still won't pay for it, right? And so we had a client that did a survey, and they found they were looking at a pricing model: $1 a month, $100 a month, or $0 a month. 95% of the drop-offs were between 0 and 1, right? Only 5% of the competitors, when he said it's going to cost 100, dropped off, right? And that's because once they choose to pay anything, they're going to be they're less price sensitive. And so again, that's a case where you do want to look at your competitive space, because pricing is its own beast. But I think pricing, will you pay for it? Does it solve your problem, is another really good one. And if not, why, right? That's really important. And those two things really are going to inform your business. Does it look good? How does it feel? How long, those things don't really matter. I think the other thing you want to do is ask them, if you have something usable, how long it took them to accomplish specific functions for them. Because that is something that really gets to the usability that does really matter.
Awesome. And we have probably a time for one or two more questions here, but just as a reminder to the audience, if we don't get to your questions today, or you just have inquiries about Modern Logic, feel free to reach out to Linda at Modern Logic. And if you have any inquiries or any curiosities about Lighter Capital, where I'm from, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect. But yeah, just jumping into a couple final questions before we wrap at the top of the hour here. So Kirk, this is more for you. When you have a hardware plus software component to your offering, how do you decide how to monetize it? Like, do you sell the hardware and sell the software, or is the hardware included with the software, or how did you think about that?
I think we really tried to be kind of guided by the market. If customers would say, "Hey, the core functionality of this band is great, but I would be willing to pay more if it did this and that and the other thing." Or we tested some ideas and said, "Hey, if we added this as kind of a premium subscription type thing, what would you think about that?" And so we kind of went by what the market said and what people were actually suggesting to us, and saying, "Hey, it would be great if it did this, that, or the other thing." And then so we discussed like what's a free feature, what's freemium, premium, and those discussions. And it's again one of those things you can kind of just get out there and then test. It's like, okay, are we losing people? Do we try something like a free 30-day or a free 90-day and see how many people convert? So just lots of those kinds of discussions. And again, those are things that aren't a real one-way decision. You can tweak that and kind of go based on feedback. So.
Yeah, my piece there would be your margin on your hardware is going to be better than your margin on your software, even though oddly your software doesn't cost anything to ship, right? People are used to really spending massive amounts more for hardware than it actually costs. And so I think that in a B2C model, that's the first thing I would think of is sell the hardware and then have a value add that allows someone to opt into paying you more. If you're a B2B customer, you should look at an alternative model, which is licensing your hardware or renting your hardware to the client, and then building the software in and bringing that in for free. Because the hardware really is the thing that's solving the problem. The software is assisting the hardware in solving the problem, generally. Now, you might be in a case where you're building sensors and you're ingesting that data into an AI that's running a warehouse or something, then it would be a different answer. But I think if you're building something that solves a business problem and it's a piece of hardware, you should figure out how to monetize that, because in general, when you look at the fundamentals of those businesses that are actually shipping hardware, they have better income, they have better revenue than businesses that are solely focused on licensing software, because everyone wants to pay $5 a month for software. They're willing to pay a lot more for hardware.
Awesome. Well, at that note, I think we're just at the top of the hour now. So right off the bat, thanks to the audience for attending and sticking with us through the Q&A. And we hope you got a lot of value out of today's session. And we're looking forward to adding some more sessions in future quarters this year. And I'd really like to thank our presenters, Dustin and Kirk. Wonderful content today and really helpful in terms of getting our heads around getting the MVP and then getting past MVP and really building our companies. So thanks, everybody. We really appreciate the time. Yep, thanks again all.
Thank you.
Thank you.